This morning, man, we have a treat all the way from Kansas City. I'm going to introduce Brian Johnson. And if you have been with us for probably about a year now, you may remember Brian visiting last year, spending some time with our team, and was thinking about Brian in terms of just what to say about this man. And there's so much, but simply this is, Brian for me represents those people in your life that represent Jesus with skin on. This man's the real deal. And Brian sits as the director of the Kansas City Underground, which is a network of microchurches in the Kansas City area that really emerged out of a large church in Kansas City as they were experimenting and living as missionaries in neighborhoods and spaces throughout Kansas City that emerged into this beautiful network that actually the storyline goes during COVID when most churches were headed in the wrong direction in terms of their fruitfulness. One of the unique stories was the Kansas City Underground and seeing how they began to grow and this expansiveness of what God was doing in little pockets and forms that really oftentimes reflect what we read about in the early pages of the New Testament in the early church. So this morning we have such a treat as once again we welcome back Brian to speak into the life of our church. So can we do this? Can we give him a warm welcome? And let's stand up on our feet as we welcome once again Brian Johnson.
I don't know if it'll be a treat. Yeah, I don't know. Now anything I say might let you down after that introduction. So, man, it's so good to be back here to see some faces. I remember, you probably don't remember me. I like how TD said you remember me if you've been here for a year. In fact, I thought about that as I was preparing what to share with you. I was like, part of it is kind of going back to what we talked about last year. I'm like, nobody's going to remember that. That's not a part of today. So it is so good to be back in Burbank. Man, the weather in this place. I wrote down, I was here a year ago, and to be honest, this place hooked me. I've had a yearning to come back, especially when it was 2 degrees in Kansas City in January. 2. That's not appropriate. Like, I always tell people, if you're in Kansas City in the spring, you think, I get why people stayed here. Like, they took a long trip, they stopped, and they're like, this is beautiful, because they got there in the spring. But I feel like in the winter, they should have left. This should not have been a place that was like a settling point. But anyway, I sound like I don't like that city, but I do love that city. Jesus has called us there. Yeah, TD said I could talk for an hour or so, that's not true, but I felt like if I put that out there, anything less than that now is going to feel like a win. So I just wanted to say before we really dive in this morning, like what a joy it is to sit and just hear voices behind me singing out, and so beautiful. Jesus just gave me this picture while we were singing of, you know how, well, maybe you don't feel this way. I do this. Like, I tend to think that I'm the center of the universe because I'm a human, and I woke up, and it's the beginning of the day. And it's like, really, we're sort of at the tail end of a day, right? And as the world spins, a lot of other people have already experienced parts of today. And it just gave me a picture of little pockets like this all over the world where people's hands were raised, and it was almost like he was just transporting me from little apartment buildings to large worship spaces to banana trees to wherever. And the people of God across this globe, and we're at the end of it, adding our praise into that. And it's such just a humbling picture. So thank you for giving your voices back to Jesus in that way and singing your praise out to him. When we were here a year ago, I shared with you a passage that I really enjoy spending a lot of time in. And I'm going to, so that I don't go an hour, I'm going to do a lot of reading of this. So just know that I'm going to look down at this a lot so I don't get lost. But we were in 2 Corinthians chapter 3, and in that passage, it talks all about how Moses was coming down from this mountain with the law, with these 10 commandments, and he had this glory that was shining about him, and then he put on this veil, but he didn't have to put on the veil, because as soon as he left God's presence, that glory that he was reflecting was diminishing. But as Paul's writing to the Corinthians, he's given this metaphorical picture that we have this veil on our faces, or had this veil on our faces, that separated us from understanding God's love in our life. But the point of the veil, or the point that Paul was making, is that when Christ came, he removed that veil. We can see clearly now who Jesus is, and because we can see clearly, he's transforming us from one degree of glory to the next if we will set our eyes on him, if we will behold him. And I use these words, we will become what we behold. As we see more and more of who Jesus is, we will become what we behold. We will become like him. And the main point that I was making was how we need to set our eyes on Jesus and do so in a way that nothing would compare with our affection and our attention to him, and to love him so much that our love for anything else would pale in comparison. When I share those passages that we looked at last year with people, and I encourage believers to live in that way, something happens in me because of the way that I'm formed, maybe partly because of the way that I'm raised, the background that I grew up in, but I internally go to this sort of unredeemed place in my spirit where I think, oh, I can do that. I can set my eyes on Jesus. I can set my eyes on him, and I can show him how much I love him. And what I'm really saying is, hey, Jesus, watch this. I'm going to prove to you how much I love you. You'll see that I'm going to set my eyes on you so much that I'm going to show you I was worth dying for. Every nail, every whip, every drop of blood, I'm going to show you that I was worth that. I'm not going to ask you to show your hands. I'm just confessing to you, I do this. And it's a weight that I put on myself. And it's a mentality that believes if I work hard enough and do enough good things, that somehow I will earn the love of God. Even though Scripture clearly communicates that you cannot earn God's love. So I'm thankful this morning that I get to offer you what I consider to be part 2 of that message. It took a year to get here. And I don't want to negate anything I said. I believe in those things, but this is a little bit of the other side of the coin for me. Maybe you weren't in the room last year, and again, maybe you were, and you're like, I don't remember what he said. And maybe you're thinking, that sounds heavy, and it was. And it is that way for me a lot of times. So I hope this morning will be much lighter. Jesus has been connecting 2 passages for me lately. One is in Hebrews and one is in the book of Ephesians. And I think we're going to connect both of those passages in under an hour, so don't worry about that. So if you brought a Bible, you want to pull up Hebrews chapter 10, that's where I'm going to go. It'll also be on the screen, or if you want to pull it up on your phone. If you read the entire book of Hebrews, I believe that what you would find in this book is that it is especially committed to the supremacy of Christ in all things. I love that phrase, by the way. It's such a big, gigantic phrase. Like, I can't do it because I'm going to have to move the mic, but I feel like you have to, like, open your hands up, like the supremacy of Christ in all things. It's just a weighty phrase. And I love that phrase. I believe in that phrase. Ephesians chapter 4 talks about how Jesus is going to fill the entire universe with himself. Let's let that sit for a minute. I don't know that we can fully appreciate and fully comprehend what it means when it says Jesus is going to fill the entire universe, because we can't really grasp how tiny we are. But it says that Jesus is going to fill the entire universe with himself. And when I think about how massive of an idea that is, I think about that phrase, the supremacy of Christ in all things. If we were to work through the book of Ephesians, we would see how the writer is trying to help his audience, which is primarily Jewish, understand how everything in the Old Testament was just a shadow of what Jesus would be and what he would bring. So everything that was up to the Gospels is only a shadow. In fact, the writer even says those words in chapter 8. It says the system set up before Jesus, in other words, the entire Old Testament, the book of the law, with all its regulations, was only a copy and a shadow. It wasn't the real thing. It was pointing to something, and it's important for us to know what's there because it's pointing to the reality, but it's not the reality itself. And so he's doing this for 8 or 9 chapters. I'm not in Hebrews yet, but if you scrolled through those, you'd see some of these titles of the different sections, like Jesus is greater than Moses, and Christ is our high priest. Melchizedek is greater than Abraham, and Jesus is like this guy. It's a cool story, by the way. You should go back and read about him. But for 8 chapters, he is comparing these things, and he's talking about how it's just a shadow. And in chapter 9 of Hebrews, the writer reminds the audience that the old covenant had all these regulations that the people of God had to follow. I don't think they needed reminding, honestly. They had to show up and offer these sacrifices over and over again to prove themselves clean before God. It created for them that mentality, right, that they had to prove themselves a certain way to be accepted. And the writer at one point says that there are so many rules and regulations, he can't even talk about them. Like, it's just too much. So that's the scene. For 9 chapters of Hebrews, the writer has made the point that what was in the past, the old way, is a shadow of the true things, but that way is now gone. That way was full of laws and regulations. It overwhelmed people. It never really restored us to our relationship with God. And those people worked hard every day of their life to be perfect before God, and they never accomplished it. Now I want to read to you from Hebrews chapter 10. So this is beginning in verse 1. It says, "The old system under the law of Moses was only a shadow, a dim preview of the good things to come." I like that, a dim preview. Not the good things themselves. The sacrifices under that system were repeated again and again, year after year, but they were never able to provide perfect cleansing for those who came to worship. If they could have provided perfect cleansing, the sacrifices would have stopped, for the worshipers would have been purified once for all time, and their feelings of guilt would have disappeared. But instead, those sacrifices actually reminded them of their sins year after year. For it is not possible for the blood of bulls and goats to take away sins. That is why when Christ came into the world, he said to God, "You did not want animal sacrifices or sin offerings, but you have given me a body to offer. You are not pleased with burnt offerings or other offerings for sin." Then I said, "Look, I have come to do your will, O God, as it is written about me in the scriptures." First, Christ said, "You did not want animal sacrifices or sin offerings or burnt offerings or other offerings for sin, nor were you pleased with them, though they are required by the law of Moses." Then he said, "Look, I have come to do your will." He cancels the first covenant in order to put the second one into effect. For God's will was for us to be made holy by the sacrifice of the body of Jesus Christ once for all. Under the old covenant, the priest stands and ministers before the altar day after day, offering the same sacrifices again and again, which can never take away sins. But our high priest offered himself to God as a single sacrifice for sins, good for all time. Then he sat down in the place of honor at God's right hand. And there he waits until his enemies are humbled and made a footstool under his feet. For by that one offering he forever made perfect those who are being made holy. Now, I love what the writer has done here in comparing the Old Testament and the New Testament, or the Old Covenant and the New Covenant, showing the stark contrast that exists. Christ and the law and the reality of what Jesus has actually accomplished, what the law couldn't, but what Jesus has done. And he starts out, he's almost mocking the old system. He says that old way, it can't do anything. If it could, they would have stopped doing it over and over again, right? Like, look at this thing. If it could have provided perfect cleansing, they would have stopped doing it. But instead, it's actually reminding them of their sin day after day after day. In the old way, what do you see? This is the part I want to go really deep in on, is verse 11. Under the old covenant, it says you see the priest stands and ministers daily. Now, more accurately, the language says every priest stands. So what it's trying to say is there are actually a multitude of priests that are standing daily. And what are they doing? They're standing daily, day after day, and they're offering repeatedly the same sacrifices, which can never take away sin. So there are 3 specific things I see listed. There's a multitude of priests, a host of priests. They're standing, and they're offering an imperfect sacrifice. So we hold on to those 3 things. The writer is kind of building this up. In the old way, there's a multitude of priests standing daily, offering again and again the same sacrifice that is accomplishing nothing. But then Christ is presented in contrast to this as a polar opposite, if you will. And the writer says, "But our high priest offered himself to God as a single sacrifice for sins once for all." Multitude of priests standing daily, offering again and again the same thing. Jesus, one high priest, offers a perfect sacrifice. And then I love this. Instead of standing daily, it says he sat down. Like, I'm done. I have accomplished what I have come to accomplish. So again, a multitude of priests standing daily, repeating again and again. But Jesus, a perfect Savior, comes, offers himself once for all, and then he sits down. Again, as if there is nothing left to be done. He took care of it. He's not anxious. He feels no need to demonstrate anything else because he has taken care of what he came to take care of. And then look at verse 14. Honestly, I didn't even have an emphasis on this verse before this morning. I went back to look over these notes, and I saw this verse, and Jesus was like, actually, verse 14 is the point that I was trying to take you to, so that's where we're going now. He says, for by that one offering, he forever made perfect those who are being made holy. Now, again, we lose something with our English translations because we don't have like the original thing the author was trying to do, but the original language would have come across something like this. He forever perfected those who are being perfected. What does that mean for us? It means you have been perfected. Jesus has secured that peace in your life. It is guaranteed. He sat down. He is done. You are also being perfected. He is continually helping us move from unbelief to belief in Jesus in every area of our life. And the writer is saying, Jesus will do that in you, not you trying to work your way to it. The writer of Hebrews is telling us, if you feel the need to work your way into the kingdom of God, be free from that. There's no more constant motion needed. Be free from the feeling that you have to prove yourself before God. In one fell swoop, Jesus puts on flesh, sacrifices his own life, and sits down. He is done, and this is the good news. When he speaks from the cross, it is finished. That is exactly what he meant. It is done. And that's the freedom in this passage for me, that Jesus has done the work. He has perfected me by the shedding of his blood. It doesn't depend on me. The Hebrew people that this author was writing to certainly felt that daily burden to prove themselves. And he's saying, let go of that. Don't let that be a burden to you anymore. That old way is done. And the good news of the gospel, it frees us from running ragged, making our efforts to please God. Our performance will never be perfect. But Christ's performance at Calvary is perfect. So I believe that at the heart of us is a desire to be free from a striving to be perfect before God. It's a freedom from fear, a freedom from bondage, and yet something in me, that's what I was telling you in the beginning, something in me just still seems to drive me to want to be like good enough. I want to show him that I was worth it. And even though the gospel is telling me that only Jesus can make me free, somehow, if I'm left to myself, I will diligently work to prove myself before God. It's as if I will stand daily offering this imperfect sacrifice, going like, is this enough? Did I do enough? I'm sinking because I feel that weight. Like, is this enough? This has been a lifelong battle for me. It's not something new. Occasionally, though, I have these like little breakthrough moments where Jesus shows up. And he kind of sets me free from that. I remember the first time I realized this truth, that I didn't have to work for God's love. I want to pause right there and ask you, if you have a journal or something that you're writing on, or the notes section of your phone, I want to encourage you to ask the Spirit just to bring to mind a time where he's done that in your life. As I tell this part of my story, I want you to think about, what's that space or that place or that time where Jesus stepped in and said, hey, you don't have to do any more work for me. You're free. Because I want you to be able to recall that story. So the first time I realized this was Maundy Thursday before Easter Sunday. You celebrate Maundy Thursday in this faith? No? I don't know. Maundy Thursday is like in the church this day. It's the day Jesus celebrated this Passover meal with his disciples. It's a really beautiful meaning behind the word Maundy. I'm not going to get into that because I told you I'd stay under an hour. But I was working for this church, and we had spent all week setting up for this full night of prayer. Like, we're going all the way through the night praying. Then we've got these Good Friday services, and then Easter Sunday, and Man, it's like Thursday, and I had gone home, and I was exhausted. And I was putting our first, we only had one kid at the time, and he was like 3 or 4 months old. So this is the first Easter I've experienced with a child, which is very significant for me. And I remember I was trying to put him to sleep. I was exhausted. And so I'm pacing the floor with him. I'm just walking, and I'm singing to him. And rather than cooperating and going to sleep, he was just screaming his head off. And I'm like, okay, I don't need this right now. And he also wore a necktie his entire first year of his life. And by necktie, I mean a bib, because he spit up constantly. Like, even our doctor was like, I've never seen a child spit up like this long. So I'm like holding him, and I'm covered in all this like spit up. And I think other things had leaked on me as well. And I'm pacing the room. You don't believe this story? You're looking at me like it's not true. Before you have your first kid, people give you a ton of unsolicited advice. You don't ask for it. They're just handing it out like it's free. And you don't want it, but you have to take it. Except I didn't really take it. I mostly just ignored people. Except for this one piece of advice. Somebody said sometimes when they just won't stop crying, you just need to cry with them. And I was like, I can get on board with this. I remember this piece of advice. I've reached the point where I'm going to step into this piece of advice. And so I sat down in this rocker that we had. And again, I am covered with things. And I'm rocking, and I just started crying. I figured if he's going to leak on me, I'm going to leak onto him. So, man, I'm praying, and all of a sudden it just gets quiet. And I'm holding my son. Again, this is like 3 days before Easter. And I just remember feeling this sense of overwhelm. Jesus just said, man, is there anything this kid can do to make you stop loving him? Nope. Is there any part of your love that he does not have access to? Nope. I said, do you see what you're covered in? Yep. He says, this is the way you come to me. You come to me covered in all this stuff, and you just dump it all on me. I'm covered in this now. But there's nothing about my love that you don't have access to. And man, I just remember feeling this sense of overwhelm and joy. And it was like the first time in my life that I felt so free in God's love. And I go back to that moment. Oh, I can't believe I left this part off. It was the first time Jesus said to me, stop trying to prove to me you were worth dying for. You were. That's why I did it. And so when I am in this place of striving, I go back to that moment over and over. And I just recall the love of the Father in that space where he would speak that truth over me and give me this moment of full surrender and this picture of just, I'm a little baby throwing all my stuff onto him, and he's just receiving it and saying, I just love you. Nothing changes that. And there's not like an extra storage bank of love that one day you'll get more access to if you're good enough. But here's my confession to you. Lately, I've been striving again. Lately, I've returned to thinking I have to do for God in order for him to accept me. And I've continually heard the Spirit say, cease striving. I am enough. My sacrifice is enough. I don't need you achieving your perfection. I'm going to continue working in you to achieve that. Be open to letting me work in you. But I keep saying back, yeah, I know, but you probably need my help. And when I find freedom, it's because I have this rare moment of breakthrough where I can say, you have done it, and I just avail myself to you. I don't need to earn your love. And I hope this is beginning to be good news for you this morning. Like when TD and I talked about where this message would go, I told him, I said, I think this is what Jesus wants me to say to your faith community, because it's what he's saying to me right now. And maybe there are people sitting in this space that you gather on Sunday morning that just need to hear you are loved. And you don't have to do anything. You're just loved. And secondly, there was something that I felt like Jesus was saying about our response to that kind of love in our life. And our motivation to do good things. Like, surely it's not all bad, Jesus. He said, no, but let's just talk about the order in which those good things come. And so he took me to Ephesians 2, and this moment that I had about a month and a half ago with some leaders, and we were training some leaders, and I was reading from Ephesians chapter 2, and the first time I stood on a platform and preached, I was 14 years old, and I'm sure the message was like 8 minutes, which would have been nice for you today, right? And these are the verses that I shared from, Ephesians 2, 8 through 10. I was going to read them to you. It says, God saved you by his grace when you believed. And you can't take credit for this. It is a gift from God. Salvation is not a reward for the good things we have done, so none of us can boast about it. For we are God's masterpiece. He has created us anew in Christ Jesus so we can do the good things he planned for us long ago. And when I was reading this passage, I knew in that moment, I was like, oh, he said good things twice. That might not seem like a big deal to you, but it was the first time like this translation revealed something new for me, okay? I accidentally jumped ahead in my notes, but I felt like I needed to go ahead and tell you where I was going with that. Essentially, we can tie this passage directly to Hebrews, right? I mean, he's saying, God saved you by his grace when you believed. You can't take credit for this. It's a gift from God. What he's actually saying is not just that your salvation is a free gift, but also the belief that you have for that salvation is also a gift. Like the original language is saying, God gave you faith so that you could believe. That's beautiful. Like he's gifting us faith. He's like, you can't even take credit for this. I'm just going to give you some more. And he's gifting us salvation. He's gifting us faith. Why? Because he wants us to be in relationship with him. He wants us to receive love from him. You can't take credit for it. Now, there's certainly participation on our part. Like, we're not passive bystanders in this, but ultimately, God has pursued his creation. And since the fall in the garden, and he's still pursuing us today. And salvation is no reward. That's what Hebrews was saying. It's not a reward for the good things you have done. We don't get to go around boasting and saying like, this is why I'm in. What have you done? That's my way, though. This is the way that I live. I live as if this were true far too often. One moment I would stand in awe of my inability before God, like this morning as we're singing, and just thinking about how massive he is, that he is spinning this earth around, and everywhere across this globe there are followers that are lifting their hands and lifting their voices in praise of him. And I am in awe and so thankful for him. And in the next moment, I'm pointing my finger at people I love saying, come on, let's do better. It's like I'm one of those Hebrew priests standing before him daily, offering these sacrifices again and again. I'm trying to build my little multitude of priests around me. Now, again, I think my motivations are pure. I think my yearning to respond to Christ's love comes from this place where I'm like, I see it. I want to do something because of that. Your free gift is motivating to me. But the problem is it's about order. And what I mean by that is I tend to look at what Jesus has done, and I want to offer the good things so that I can get it. And what this Ephesians passage and the way that it's translated in the NLT here and what Jesus spoke to me in that moment was salvation is not a reward for these good things. Salvation is this free thing we enter into, and then Jesus has these good things for us to step into on the backside. And there's this invitation into these good things, and the difference is not here's my good things and the things I think are good for you and the things that you want from me. It's the good things that he has planned. Verse 10, we are God's masterpiece. He set us apart and he's created these good things for us to step into. It's felt like Jesus was saying, I don't want you to do good things as payment for what I did for you. All that was a free gift. I want you to step into these good things I planned for you, because in partnering with me in them, you'll be joining with me in bringing beauty and justice and good news to the broken places in this world. And what I was missing was that I was trying to determine all the good things I was supposed to do when Jesus already had them planned out. I don't have to live under that weight anymore. And I've wrestled with this message for like 2 or 3 weeks now, because I don't have to stand up and do this every week. So I had a lot of time to lean into this and prepare, and I kept going back and deleting stuff and rewriting, and I don't even know if this has made any sense or has been good for you. I hope that it is. But here's what I know and want to say plainly to you this morning. You are loved. It's so hard to receive that, though, sometimes. You don't have to do anything to receive it. It's so hard to say that and believe it. Like, you know that's true in your soul, but it's like it's difficult to really wrap your soul around it. Rather than just receiving that love. You might feel like you're someone that has to earn the love of Jesus. You might feel the need to prove something to him by all the good things you can do for him. Again, if you're like me, that can be overwhelming. It can suck the life out of you. It can be an oppressive weight. But the good news is that you get to step into the good things that Jesus is inviting you into. And he wants you to. He loves you so much that he didn't just save you for the sake of what happens after you die. He saved you so that you can partner with him in seeing the kingdom come on earth as it is in heaven. But don't get it backward. Our good things don't earn us points, but they do put on the display of the love of Jesus in our life for those that don't yet know how much they matter to him. I want to tell you one more story, because I think this is really where Jesus wanted me to land today. It's kind of like back and forth on, gotta have the right closing, because in this moment, I'm thinking I need to be perfect before you so that Jesus will love me. And I wish that weren't true, but it is. So sorry. Yeah, let's go here. I'm going to tell you a quick story and then we'll wrap up, I promise. But I want you to recall that story where Jesus stepped into your life and helped set you free from any feeling or need that you had to prove your worth to him. When the oldest son that I was just talking about, when he was probably, 3, he was old enough to clearly talk and communicate. I think I told you guys this story last year. Oh, well, you've heard it. I was driving him to school, and I was like, man, I want to give him a different picture of how Jesus loves him. I want to give him a different kind of identity than what I grew up in. I don't want him to feel like he has to earn my love or prove himself. And so I started doing this thing with him as I was driving on our way to preschool every day. I say, Cass, you are my son. And he learned to say, son. I say, you are my, and he'd go, son. And I'm looking at him in the rearview mirror. We're making eye contact. It's a beautiful moment. I said, and you are loved. And I am, and he'd go, proud of you. Because when I taught him to say it, that's why, I'm trying to tell him I'm proud of you. So he would shout back to me, proud of you. And so we did this thing for a long time. Every day I'd take him to school. You are my son. You are loved. I am proud of you. And eventually I said, okay, buddy, here's what I want you to do. I want you to say I'm proud of me. And he's pretty bright, so he figured it out. I was like, man, this is beautiful. Like, I'm helping set a new identity for who he is as a person. You don't have to earn any love. You're just my son. That's who you are. You're loved. That's who you are. I'm just proud of you. The end. We had more children, and with the girls, I began to do this with them as well. I say, you are my daughter. You are loved. I am proud of you. And I remember one night trying to put them to bed. And I was doing it at bedtime with them. And I was wanting them to say, I'm proud of me. And so I looked at them and I said, say proud of me. And they said, proud of you. I said, no, say proud of me. Yes, proud of you. No, you say I'm proud of you. You say proud of me. I'm proud of you. They were so confused by what was going on. And I needed to make that moment funny so I wouldn't break down crying again, because I left that room and I remember feeling this like, I can't say that to Jesus because I don't believe that he's proud of me. And I don't believe that he loves me like that. And I just kept wanting to say, I'm proud of you. And he kept wanting to say, I'm proud of you. And now I do it with my youngest son too. And he loves it. He's like, do that thing. Do that thing. And I remember we were reading the Jesus Storybook Bible one morning. And I got to this. This is a fantastic translation of the Bible. You should all pick up the Jesus Storybook Bible and just read from it. It's way better. I'm reading this passage where Jesus is baptized. And when he comes up out of the water, it says the dove descended on him. And God says, this is my son. I love him and I'm proud of him. And I remember sitting at the breakfast table just weeping. I was like, oh, there it is. That's where that came from. I just want to tell you that you're loved this morning. Yeah, thank you. Can I invite you to do one thing? Just close your eyes. You're his son, you're his daughter. You're loved and he's proud of you. He wants you to step into the good things that he has for you. Those good things might be sitting with an elderly neighbor every day, just having a conversation, because that's a beautiful thing for a person that might be lonely. There might be something that's burning in your heart. You see some broken place in the world. You want to make it right. That's a good thing Jesus wants you to step into. But before you can step into the good things, you need to know that you're loved, that you're his son or his daughter, and that he's proud of you no matter what. I want you to do this with me. I want you to say son or daughter based on who you are. I want you to say you're loved. And I want you to say, proud of me. I want you to do it out loud. I want you to be bold to do this. I want you to receive this. We're going to practice it one time. Ready? You are his. You are. He is. Let's do it again. You are his. You are. He is. Just as we sit in this space of reflection, I just want to invite you to ask Jesus through the Spirit to speak to your heart. Ask him what he wants you to do with this. It might be very simply just to go, I just need to figure out how to receive this. Maybe he's calling you to repent from an oppressive way of just working to earn his love. Maybe he just wants to recall to you that time where he broke in and you felt the freedom of the Father's love like you had never felt it before. Call that story back so that it is good news and brings you hope. And I want to say too, if you've never felt this love or accepted it or received it, come talk to me. Or somebody with a how can I help you sign. Jesus, thank you that you died once for all. That you set us free. and that we don't have to prove ourselves before you. That you're just proud of us, just the way we are. We know that we've only tasted a teaspoon of the ocean of your love. So will you give us capacity for more of it? And we just speak these words now that we know bring you such great joy. We're here and we're listening.